we have to provide for ourselves some kind of protein source. We've unfortunately overfished our own fisheries. It's going to take a while to build those back up again. There's potential for aquaculture that's still undeveloped. In the meantime, we have livestock that we can depend on.
And do you see the growth of agriculture and energy crops on the Big Island as being dispersed throughout the island, or would they be more concentrated in certain areas?
You know, that's a good question. My feeling is that probably it's going to be dispersed. The reason is, if it works and it works well, it'll be a potential for stabilizing incomes in the islands. And because we have different climates on different sides of our island systems, there's going to have to be a requirement for different kinds of trees producing these biodiesels on different sides of the islands. A point in case might be, for example, Jatropha. Jatropha curcas is a tree that grows well under drought conditions. It grows well on poor soil. It might grow well on the dry sides of our islands. The palm oil, on the other hand, requires an 80 inches of rainfall or more a year for water. Because there's a huge energy need in our islands for transportation fuels that I don't see going away, then probably we'll have diversified ag systems for this. I think there's a lot of potential for genetics work. I have seen in my own experience and research, I've enjoyed working with genetics. And my field was more in the evolutionary genetics end of things, and so I have a clear understanding of how genetic systems can evolve. And so that's where my interest is. I did have a stint when I was in the USDA of working with some organisms where I found things called jumping genes. These are genes used to transfer genes from one organism into another. They're carriers, and basically carrier systems. And I became a little bit scared of what the potential of these genes could have. And so I opted to not work with them. That's an individual scientist's choice to some certain extent. Most of the geneticists I know that are actually trained in genetics are very clear in their own minds where they think these gene systems could go and should go. Most of the people that are actually doing the work, however, in this area are biochemists or molecular biologists, and so there's a difference in the training behind each one of those groups.
Do you think genetically engineered crops will play a role in bioenergy?
I have heard rumors that there's a potential for developing those kind of crops. I'm a little wary about it myself. I don't know that will happen here. Perhaps in the future there will be a need to do that if there's no other approach that can be useful. For example, one might envision algae that have triple the amount of lipids in it that you would otherwise have. But otherwise, I think it'd be probably not worthwhile investigating. And the problem with growing that type of algae is that it has to be kept from competition with other kinds of algae that's not high in lipids. The spores are around us everywhere in the air. If they settle into the raceways or wherever we're growing this high lipid content algae, they will outcompete the high lipid content algae. So there has to be systems developed that are probably going to be closed systems, and then we have to figure out a way to harvest from those closed systems. And so you see the technology really has to be developed. They require certain conditions to grow and to survive, and they are probably less competitive in most cases. Otherwise, we would see them everywhere, and we don't see that. There is potential for converting any type of green biomass to a molecular form molecular forms that can then be converted again into the kind of fuel you want. That's called a mass conversion or biomass conversion type of a technical approach. That's a very expensive approach, and it requires a lot of equipment to do it, but that certainly would be a viable way of handling green waste material, for example, or eucalyptus forests that we're trying to figure out how and when to harvest, things like that. One of the advantages of oil palm plantations or plantings, even on small operations, is that You can plant legumes between the trees that provide a feed for small livestock like goats. You can grow an industry around goats, producing goat cheeses, goat milk, and even meat. And then there's other things you could do with it. You could free-range chickens on it, for example. Then between some of these trees, you might be able to grow certain kinds of legume crops, or maybe some other crops that would prove valuable for.
Do you envision something beyond UH?
I do. I'm I'm actually 66 years old.
Okay.
And I retired once from the U.S. Government. I look to retire eventually from the university in a few more years. I would like to see some of the programs I've started there solidified so they can continue. After that, I have some options open to me. I have a farm that I own in the Midwest. I bought it when I was in the USDA working there. It's in Missouri, 160-acre farm. It sits above the Missouri River on the Ozark uplift, basically, and so it has rolling hills on it, and the hill tops are open for grass growing, and the gulches and gullies are forested with oak forest. So I can combine a small process where I'm harvesting some of the oak for woodwork and things, and I'm perhaps changing the hilltops from grass to vineyards. So that's kind of a challenging thing I'd like to think about. The family ranch that I grew up on is still in the family in Idaho. I own some land there too, so there's possibilities there. Mostly I think though what I would like to do, and which I've always kind of envisioned myself doing but somehow got off to the wrong direction, is writing more music, which is my hobby, and playing guitar and writing poetry.